Now that being said, I want to start in kind of a random place this morning, and that is with just a very simple sort of question. You all know how to peel a banana? I mean, that seems like a fairly easy thing to do. Now, did you know that there are multiple ways of peeling a banana? Did you know that you have probably been doing it wrong for a lot of years? I didn't know any of this for a long time because I've always been one that I start with the big part up here. You know, this is the part you grab onto in the grocery store. Start with that, and I go and I peel it. And if necessary, pull out a pocket knife at times to get that. And then now I can peel my banana, right? That's the way that it's supposed to be done. That's the way at least I've learned how to do that over the years. And I do like the taste of bananas. We didn't see it earlier. Jack goes, banana, banana, banana. He loves bananas. I knew I was taking a risk setting them down up there, but I needed someplace where I could come and grab them that was close. Did you know that when we go to peel it that way, that what we're actually doing is peeling that from the bottom of the banana? Have you ever seen a banana on a tree? It looks a little bit like this. If you're watching online at home, let me put that up there so you can see it. The stem is that part that's down on the bottom, and then it grows up. What kind of fruit grows up? I've never really kind of understood that, but that's what it does. It goes down here, and it grows up like that. So whenever we go to grab them off the shelf at Walmart, we're grabbing them from the bottom of the fruit. And that's just what that does. And so I ran across something the other day that said, what you really want to do if you want to peel a banana well is that you don't start from the stem. You flip it over and you start from here. You squeeze it a little bit, and you go and you just pull it off like that. When I tried this the first time on Friday, I did that and I squeezed the top and the banana almost flew out of the peel. I was just amazed at that. And okay, now I'm going to have to put those away because you'll need to watch me trying to eat a banana for the rest of the day. So you may be asking, although I think you've gotten used to this at some point, why is he talking about peeling bananas this morning? Part of it is I wanted to take a really long way to be able to get to this. There's more than one way to peel a banana because, I like silly old cliches and things like that. But really, it's important to I love that visual reference because we're coming into John's Gospel this morning. And in John's Gospel, more so than any other book in the Bible, John's Gospel has many different ways that you can look at it. Many different ways, so to speak, that you can peel back the layers of what's there. And with it, we have to be really careful about what we're doing at any given point in time with that as we look at it, we have to know, well, what layer are we looking at and how are we looking at it at this point? Because sometimes you can have lots of layers like a rose petal, or you can have lots of layers like an onion. And the difference is knowing if I'm putting it in water, so it can be pretty, a blooming rose is much prettier to look at than an onion, right? But if I'm sitting at Outback Steakhouse, a blooming onion is much prettier to look at than a rose, right? And we just have to know kind of where we are and what we're doing. And it really applies with John's Gospel because this morning we're in chapter 14 of this. And this is a section that's called the Farewell Discourse. Jesus in some ways is making his closing arguments. It picks up on what we would think of as Thursday night. And so we know we're just days away from, we're not even just days away, we're very close to Good Friday, we're just days from Easter morning. That's where this part of the story picks up. And so it can be said that he's making his closing arguments, but more importantly, he's getting his last bits of teaching to his disciples. But even that doesn't get at what he's doing here. Because what he's doing here is even far more intimate than that. Far more important than that. Most often I use this passage out of John 14 in funerals. That's the first layer of that, because this passage, when you go all the way through, we had very few verses in here today, because after that it becomes hard to find a stopping place. You either get 4 verses or you get 40 verses in this one, because it's hard to find a good place to stop. But this is so good for funerals because it's comforting. And it tells us that one of the things we know about our Christian faith, one of the hopes that we have, is that death is not an endpoint in our faith, but that there is more to it than that. Things change and become different after that, but it's not a stopping place. And that's one of the layers that we can see there. But as one of the commentaries I was looking at this week was pointing out, we have to be careful not to over-sentimentalize this passage. Because if we do, then we miss out on all of the other layers that are present. It's a good passage for funerals, but it's also a great passage for so much else. As we pick up in chapter 14, the disciples are gathered in what we would think of as the upper room. And chapter 13 is like this big, giant passage. At the start of it, Jesus washes the feet of his disciples. So it starts off there, very low key. But then when we go through that chapter, we get Judas' betrayal and his leaving the rest of the disciples. We get Jesus telling Peter that he's going to deny him 3 times. So we've got all of this building up in that very short space. And so we come into chapter 14, and it's like the emotion that is present there is almost palpable. Something that you can feel like you can just reach out and touch it. Because there is worry and there is concern. There is fear of what they're going to do, of what is going to happen next, of what is going to happen to Jesus, of what will happen to them as the disciples, of what to expect in the future. Basically, take every emotion that you can have when life is in a moment of big change, good or bad, or both at the same time, and put it into one place. That's where they were starting chapter 14. All of those things together at one time, and the tension and the anxiousness and the anxiety is real. And Jesus starts this passage off with these words. Don't be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. Or stop. Take a deep breath in. And then let it out. And almost do it again. Take a deep breath in. And then let it out. As Jesus says those words, the tension is beginning to ease just a little bit. And I have to tell you that every time I read that verse, I feel my own tension and anxiety ease, sometimes more than others, but always it becomes better after those words. And as the disciples are starting to kind of come back from that point of almost going too far, Jesus keeps going. Jesus keeps teaching and preaching. He goes on to verse 2 and he says, "My Father's house has room to spare. If that weren't the case, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you?" There is a deepness in this moment that Jesus doesn't have with any other group of people. And we have to work really hard to keep from focusing on being sad or sentimental here, because they are sad. There is that sense of loss, but there's more there. It's not just that Jesus is getting ready to go away on a long trip someplace, or that somehow Jesus is dying of natural causes, or some other thing that we would say here that is more understandable and easier to deal with. But in other parts of John's gospel, when Jesus says, "Don't be troubled," that word "troubled" gets used in some other places. And as the New Interpreter's Bible puts it, describes it better like this: Jesus' agitation and disturbance in the face of the power of death and evil, not simply his sadness. It's not just being troubled, but it's in the very real face of death and evil. The two of those together are exponentially greater than either one of them on their own. These were guys that knew what they were up against. When I was younger, and younger could mean yesterday or could mean a year ago, but when I was younger, I used to think that, because you all know I like to kind of poke fun at the disciples a little bit, because I keep thinking, man, guys, this is so obvious. Why didn't you see this? The problem is they did see it. but they also saw everything else that was going on. They knew everything else that was taking place around them, and they understood it. They were very well aware of what they were up against and what it was that Jesus was doing and the inherent danger that came with that and the evil that was a part of what they were facing. When we say death and evil, it's not just the one, but it's both of them. This is what they were facing. This is what they knew. This is what they were looking at as they were gathered in that moment. As Judas went out, they knew he was going to do something. They didn't know what. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew it was not going to be good because they knew what they were facing. And so Jesus is speaking to them not just in his role as teacher, not just in his role of master to disciples, but also in his relationship as friends with them. A friendship that he shared with them that was deeper and more profound than what we described when we talked about last week between David and Jonathan. And that is one of the best friendships that we see almost of all time. And yet theirs is deeper than that. And so he is telling them, Jesus is telling them, guys, it's going to be okay. Whatever happens, what happens in the next life, it's taken care of. Whatever it is that's coming up, don't worry, I'm already prepared for that. I'm preparing a place, and you know that you are going to be there. So there's that first bit of comfort that he is providing for them. Not just in sadness, but in preparation because he knows what is going to happen next. But then he spends a whole lot more time telling them, and this is the thing we have to be careful not to miss. He spends more time telling them how he is still going to be watching over them, how he is still going to be teaching them and helping them and strengthening them, and how even after he is gone from this world, he is not gone from them because of love. This relationship that he has with them is not just one that is bound by his physical presence, but they are his, and he loves them, and he will be there with them, and not even death will hold him back. And this is the same thing that he tells us today as well. First, don't be troubled. Yes, you may be surrounded by death and evil, and that is going to be a thing, but that is not what has power here. No, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And Jesus doesn't tell us so that we can use it to make sure folks know where the truth is, and if they don't have the truth, they're somehow excluded from things. That misses the point of what Jesus is saying. But so that we know that death and evil don't have power over us. We know where the truth lies, and we know that these other things don't have power, that the things of this world don't have power over us, that the relationship he has with us as teacher, as master, as Messiah, as friend, not one to be used to exclude others, but one that shows us that the power of this world is not the end. And that his life with us does not end in death, but that his life with us does not end. For us, we share in this same relationship. And we do just as the disciples did. And they struggle with it because they don't really understand a whole lot of all of this that's going on until they get to Pentecost, but that's okay because they were the first group to go through this. They were learning all of this for the first time. And their response, and our response, is to change the way that we live in response to who Jesus is. Because he is with us even now, even to this day, and in all the days to come. And that shapes the way we live, that shapes the way we do things, that shapes the whole texture of our lives. Because in him we know that he goes with us. And that we don't have to be afraid of what is coming around us. We don't have to be in fear of what others will do to us, because ultimately we always know that he has prepared a place, but more importantly, that he doesn't leave us on our own. That's a message we can take in a world that has lost both of those things, that doesn't know what is still to come after and struggles trying to find that strength and support and help that they need in this life now. So let us do just as the disciples did. They took that relationship they had with Jesus and the importance of it and the depth of it, and they went out and they shared it with all the world. And so let us go and share that with all the world also. Most importantly, let us do this in Christ's name. Amen.